Once upon a time, on a faraway planet called Ruusan, there lived a little girl named Rain. She was small, with bright eyes and a big heart. Rain lived with her family in a quiet village where the trees grew tall and the sky stretched wide and endless. She loved playing outside, running with her cousins, and listening to her father tell stories at night. For Rain, life was simple and safe, but all of that was about to change. War had come to Ruusan. Far above in the stars, two great armies fought each other. The Jedi, who wanted peace, and the Sith, who wanted power. Their battle spilled onto Ruusan, filling the skies with ships and the fields with soldiers. One day, fighting swept close to Rain's village. The ground shook and the air filled with smoke and fire. Rain and her family tried to flee, but in the chaos, she became separated. She ran and ran through the woods, calling out for her father and mother, but no one answered. Alone and frightened, Rain wandered into a battlefield. Around her, soldiers clashed with lightsabers that glowed red, green, and blue. The sounds of shouts and crashes filled her ears. She was only a child, but her heart pounded with a strength she didn't understand. When danger came near, when a soldier almost struck her, something strange happened. Without meaning to, Rain reached out with her feelings, and the world seemed to bend around her. The soldier stumbled back as if pushed by invisible hands. Rain didn't know it, but she had just used the Force. The Force was the great power that connected all living things in the galaxy. Some could touch it, shape it, and use it. Rain was one of those rare few. At first, she didn't understand. She only knew that when she was scared or angry, the strange power would burst out of her. Once, when wild beasts in the forest attacked, her fear made sharp stones rise from the ground and scatter them away. Another time, when she cried, the trees shook as if they wept with her. But even with this strange gift, Rain was still just a little girl lost in a war far bigger than herself. For days, she wandered, hungry, tired, and lonely. The smoke of battles filled the air. She saw Jedi knights in shining robes using their lightsabers to protect people. She saw Sith warriors, fierce and cruel, striking fear into their enemies. She didn't know which side was good or bad. To her, everyone looked dangerous. One night, Rain huddled beneath the roots of a fallen tree. She missed her family terribly. She wished someone would come find her, someone who could make the fear go away. In the distance, she saw the flashes of battle light up the night sky like storms. Her little hands clenched tight. She didn't yet know it, but the choices she would make in the days to come would change her life forever. For deep within the forest, someone was searching. A man, tall and strong, cloaked in dark robes, moved silently across the battlefield. His name was Darth Bane, and he was no ordinary soldier. He was a Sith Lord, one of the most powerful in the galaxy. Where others fought in noisy armies, Bane believed in a different way. He had an idea called the Rule of Two. Only two Sith should exist at a time, a master to hold the power and an apprentice to learn it. Bane was the master, but he was looking for someone to become his apprentice. And then, through the darkness of Ruusan's forests, he felt it, a small spark in the Force, weak and frightened, but filled with incredible potential. He followed the spark until he found the little girl called Rain. She looked up at him with wide eyes, unsure if he was friend or foe. He studied her carefully. In her, he saw not just a lost child, but a future of great strength. This was the beginning of her path, though she did not know it yet. And so, Rain's story was about to change forever. The lonely, scared girl of Ruusan was about to step into a destiny that would take her far from home, deep into the mysteries of the Force and onto the path of the Sith. The forest was quiet when Rain first saw the tall man in the dark robes. His shadow stretched long in the moonlight, and his eyes glowed with a strange fire. He carried a lightsaber at his side, but unlike the Jedi she had glimpsed before, his presence felt heavier, darker, as if the very air around him was holding its breath. Rain wanted to run, but her legs would not move. The man stopped a few steps away, watching her carefully, as though he were measuring her spirit. "You are not like the others," he said in a deep, steady voice. "You are strong with the Force." Rain shivered. I don't know what that means." The man lowered himself to one knee so he was closer to her eye level. "It means you have power. You can feel the energy around you. You can bend it, shape it. You are not an ordinary child." Rain blinked, her eyes filling with tears. "I just want my family." The man's face softened for only a moment, then grew stern again. "Your family is gone. The war has taken them. But you need not be weak, little one. You can survive. More than that, you can rise above all of this. I can show you how." Rain didn't fully understand, but something inside her whispered that this meeting was important, that her life would not be the same after this moment. "My name is Darth Bane," the man continued. "I am a Sith Lord." Rain tilted her head. She had heard the word Sith whispered in fear among the villagers, but she didn't know what it truly meant. Are you going to hurt me?" Bane shook his head slowly. "I see potential in you. The Sith believe in strength. We do not waste our power. If you come with me, I will teach you to use the Force. You will never be afraid again. You will never be powerless again." Rain hesitated. She thought about the nights she had cried alone, about the soldiers who had nearly struck her down, about the beasts that had chased her through the woods. She thought about how the Force had saved her, even when she didn't understand it. "Will you protect me?" she asked in a small voice. Bane's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I will make you strong enough to protect yourself." For a moment, Rain wanted to say no. She wanted her mother's embrace, her father's laughter, her village safe and whole again. But deep inside, she knew those things were gone forever. What remained was a choice: stay weak and lost, or become something greater. Finally, she nodded. "I'll go with you." Bane rose to his full height. "Good. From this day forward, you are no longer Rain. That name belongs to the child you were. You must take a new name for the one you are becoming." He looked into her eyes, his voice low and commanding. "You are Zannah." The sound of the name filled her with a strange shiver. Zannah. It felt both strange and powerful, as though it carried a destiny with it. Bane turned and began to walk. "Follow me, apprentice. Your training begins now." Zannah hurried after him, her small steps quick to keep up with his long strides. She glanced back once at the forest where she had hidden, where Rain had cried and hoped for her family. But she did not look long. That part of her life was over. Together, master and apprentice disappeared into the night. Bane began teaching her right away. As they traveled, he explained the rule of two. "There can only be two Sith at a time," he said. "A master who has power, an apprentice who craves it. You are my apprentice. You will learn everything I know. And one day, when you are strong enough, you will challenge me. If you win, you become the master. If you lose, you die." The words chilled Zannah, but she listened closely. This was not like the Jedi, who sought peace and harmony. The Sith path was hard and dangerous, but it offered strength. Bane showed her how to focus her feelings. Do not fear your anger. Do not bury your pain. Use them. Let them fuel you. The stronger your emotions, the stronger your power. At first, Zannah struggled. She was young, and her heart still longed for kindness and safety. But each lesson pulled her deeper into the Sith way. She learned to quiet her fear, to let her anger guide her strikes, and to turn her sadness into a sharp blade. One evening, after a long day of walking, Zannah asked, "Why me? Why did you choose me?" Bane studied her in the firelight. "Because you survived. Many children would have perished in the chaos of Ruusan. But you endured. You bent the Force to your will without even knowing it. That strength cannot be ignored. You are destined for greatness." His words echoed in her mind long after the fire went out. Destined for greatness. She didn't yet know what that greatness would be, but she was determined to find out. And so, the little girl who had once been Rain now walked the path of Darth Zannah, apprentice to the most powerful Sith Lord alive. Her journey had only just begun. Zannah's new life with Darth Bane was nothing like the life she had known as Rain. There were no warm family meals, no soft beds, and no playful games with her cousins. Instead, every day was filled with lessons, challenges, and dangers. Bane was not a gentle teacher. He demanded that Zannah be strong, clever, and determined. If she failed, he gave no comfort. He only said, "Failure is weakness. Weakness is death." At first, Zannah found his ways frightening. He taught her how to fight with a lightsaber, the glowing blade of energy used by both Jedi and Sith. The weapon was heavy in her small hands, but Bane made her practice again and again until her arms ached and her legs shook. "Your enemies will not wait for you to be ready," he told her. "You must be ready at all times." But the lightsaber was only part of her training. More important was her connection to the Force. Bane explained that the Force was like an endless river of power. The Jedi, he said, dipped carefully into that river, using only what they needed. But the Sith drew upon the stormy depths of it, pulling up strength from anger, from fear, from pain. "Do not hide your feelings," Bane said, as they stood on a rocky cliff. "The Jedi tell you to let go of your anger. I tell you to embrace it. Use it. Let it sharpen you." Zannah remembered the fear she had felt when she was alone in the forest, the sorrow of losing her family, the anger at being left with nothing. She reached deep into those memories, and suddenly, the rocks around her began to tremble. Pebbles lifted from the ground, floating into the air. The wind howled as though it too was alive. Bane's eyes narrowed with approval. Yes, that is the power of the dark side. But Zannah's strength was not just in lifting stones or striking with a saber. She was clever, far cleverer than most. While Bane's power came from his raw strength and iron will, Zannah learned quickly that her gift was different. She had a sharp mind and a special talent for Sith sorcery, spells and illusions that could twist the minds of others. One day, Bane set her a test. "A warrior may be strong with a blade," he said, "but a true Sith can win without lifting one. Show me your cunning." He led her to a cave where wild beasts lived, creatures with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. Zannah's heart raced. She could never fight them head-on, but she closed her eyes, reaching out with the Force, and whispered into their minds. She painted pictures of fire and thunder, images so real that the beasts cowered and fled. When she opened her eyes, the cave was empty. Bane gave her a rare nod. Illusions, a subtle weapon, but powerful. With this, you can bend your enemies without touching them. You will build upon this gift. Day by day, Zannah grew stronger. Her body became quicker, her hands steadier with the lightsaber. Her mind became sharper, learning to weave illusions and tricks that could break her enemies before they ever touched her. Yet her training was not without pain. Bane pushed her past her limits. Sometimes he left her alone in dangerous places, forcing her to rely on herself. Sometimes he spoke harshly, making her anger rise so she could learn to use it. At night, when she lay beneath the stars, Zannah sometimes remembered her life as rain. She remembered her father's stories, her mother's smile. A part of her longed for that warmth again. But then, she would hear Bane's voice in her mind. "You are no longer Rain. That girl is gone. You are Zannah, and you will be great." And so she pushed away the memories, burying them deep inside. As the years passed, Zannah began to see that her master was not just a teacher, but also a warning. He was powerful, yes, but his body bore scars, and his strength came at a cost. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, he winced as though in pain. Zannah realized something important. If she was to survive the Sith path, she would have to be clever enough not only to defeat her enemies, but also one day to surpass Darth Bane himself. For the Sith lived by one rule above all. There are always two, master and apprentice. And when the apprentice is strong enough, the master must fall. Zannah was still young, but already she was beginning to imagine that day.
Zannah's training was never easy, but as she grew older, the challenges became even greater. Darth Bane believed that strength only came through trials, so he made sure his apprentice faced danger again and again. "The galaxy will not show you mercy," he told her. "Why should I?" One of her first great tests came when Bane sent her alone into the forests of a strange world. The trees there were twisted, their roots curling like claws, and the air was filled with the sounds of unseen creatures. "Survive," Bane said simply, and then he left her. At first Zannah was frightened. She had no camp, no food, no guide. But she remembered her training. She reached out with the Force to sense the animals around her. She hunted small creatures with her saber, cooked their meat over fire, and used her illusions to scare away predators. When storms came, she built shelter from fallen branches and stone. Yet the greatest danger came not from hunger or beasts but from a group of soldiers wandering through the forest. They were mercenaries, rough men carrying blasters. They saw Zannah as nothing more than a child alone. "Easy prey," one of them laughed. But Zannah was no longer the helpless Rain of Ruusan. She reached into their minds, weaving an illusion so strong that they believed the ground was cracking beneath their feet. Terrified, the soldiers dropped their weapons and ran screaming into the night. When Bane returned days later, he found her sitting calmly beside her fire. He nodded in approval. "Good. You did not just survive. You conquered." Another time, Bane tested her in battle. He arranged for Zannah to face a Jedi Knight, a warrior trained in the light side of the Force. The Jedi believed she was only a lost girl, and he tried to speak to her gently. "Come with me, child. I will keep you safe." But Zannah did not want safety. She wanted victory. As the Jedi reached for her hand, she unleashed her illusions, filling his mind with visions of monsters surrounding him. While he stumbled in confusion, she struck with her saber. The Jedi fell, defeated not by strength but by her cunning. When she returned to Bane, her master looked at her with something close to pride. "You are learning. The strong do not meet power with power. They find the weakness in their enemy and strike there. That is the Sith way." Zannah began to understand that her greatest weapon was not her blade or her strength but her mind. Where Bane was like a hammer, smashing through walls with raw force, Zannah was like a shadow, slipping past defenses and striking unseen. Still, her path was not without struggle. Sometimes, late at night, when the battles were over and the fire was low, Zannah felt the weight of what she had done. She remembered the Jedi's kind eyes, the mercenary screams, the lives she had ended. For a moment, doubt would creep into her heart. Was this truly who she wanted to be? But each time she thought of turning away, she remembered the girl she had been, Rain, lost and powerless, crying alone on Ruusan. That girl had been weak, and weakness led only to pain. Now she was Zannah, apprentice to Darth Bane, and weakness could no longer be part of her. Bane sensed her doubts once and confronted her. "You hesitate," he said. "I wonder if the Jedi are right," she admitted. "They fight for peace." Bane's eyes blazed. "Peace is a lie. It is a chain that keeps you from reaching your true strength. Do not be fooled by their smiles and gentle words. They would rather see you small and powerless than let you rise above them. The Sith take what they are owed. We claim our destiny." His words struck deep. Zannah realized that to survive as a Sith, she would have to let go of doubt. The path ahead was hard, but it was the only path she had. And so she faced each test with greater resolve. She battled beasts, warriors, and even her own fears. With every victory, she grew stronger, her illusions sharper, her saber quicker, her will harder than before. But in the shadows of her heart, she began to keep a secret. One day, she knew, her greatest test would come, the day she would have to face Darth Bane himself.
Years passed, and the little girl who had once been Rain grew into a woman strong in the dark side of the Force. Zannah was no longer the frightened child who had clung to survival. She was now a true Sith, a master of illusions and cunning, feared by those who crossed her path. Wherever she went, whispers followed, of a young Sith apprentice whose mind tricks could make warriors flee and whose patience was as deadly as her saber. But Zannah knew the Sith way. There could only ever be two, master and apprentice. And when the apprentice became strong enough, they had to prove it. The master would not step aside. The apprentice had to take power by force. This was the rule of two, the very rule that Darth Bane had created. Bane had grown older, and though his power was still immense, his body carried the weight of years of battles and dark rituals. Sometimes his hands shook when he thought Zannah wasn't watching. Sometimes his voice cracked with the effort of holding his strength together. Zannah noticed everything. She was patient. She knew her time was coming. At last, the moment arrived. Bane called her to him, his great figure towering over her as always. "You have grown powerful, Zannah," he said, his voice deep as thunder. "More powerful than I once imagined. But power untested is nothing. You are my apprentice still, unless you can defeat me." The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Zannah felt her heart pound. She had known this day would come, but facing it was different. To win, she would have to destroy the very man who had saved her, taught her, shaped her. Yet she could not hesitate. To remain an apprentice forever was to be nothing. To be the master was to claim her destiny. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. The battle began. Darth Bane ignited his lightsaber, its red blade glowing in the dark. Zannah did the same. Their sabers clashed with a hiss, sparks flying as master and apprentice struck with speed and precision. Bane's blows were heavy, each one strong enough to break stone. Zannah's movements were quicker, lighter, weaving around his strength. But she knew she could not win with her saber alone. Bane's raw power was too great. Instead, she turned to her greatest weapon, her mind. She wove illusions into the fight, filling his vision with false images. To him, the ground seemed to shatter beneath his feet. Shadows lunged at him with claws and fangs. But Bane was no fool. He roared, pushing back with the Force, tearing through her illusions with his iron will. "You think tricks will defeat me?" he growled, swinging his blade with deadly force. Zannah leapt back, her mind racing. She had to be clever. She had to be patient. Every moment she bought with her illusions tired Bane further. Every strike he made cost him strength he could not afford to waste. At last, Zannah unleashed her most dangerous spell, Sith sorcery so deep and twisted that it could unravel the very mind of her enemy. She reached into Bane's thoughts, filling them with visions of endless torment. His body shook, his face twisted with pain, as though 1,000 voices screamed inside his head. Still he fought. Still he clung to his power. But Zannah did not relent. She pressed harder, her illusions sharper, her will stronger. The great Darth Bane staggered, his saber slipping in his grip. For a moment, it seemed as though he might strike her down with one final burst of fury. But then, with a final cry, he fell. The battlefield was silent. Zannah stood over her master's fallen form, her saber humming softly in her hand. Her chest heaved with breath, her heart pounding, but she did not falter. She had done it. She had defeated Darth Bane. In that moment, Zannah was no longer the apprentice. She was the master. She looked down at Bane's still body, a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow stirring within her. He had been her savior, her teacher, and her greatest enemy all at once. But this was the way of the Sith. The strong rose. The weak fell. And now she had risen. Zannah deactivated her lightsaber and stood tall. She was Darth Zannah, Dark Lord of the Sith. The rule of two continued. The battle was over. Darth Bane, the mighty Sith Lord who had reshaped the very way of the dark side, was gone. His apprentice, no longer the child Rain, no longer the learner Zannah, stood victorious. The rule of two demanded it, the master must fall, the apprentice must rise. And now, Darth Zannah was the Sith master. For a long time, she stood in silence. The weight of her victory pressed on her shoulders. She thought of the years she had spent at Bane's side, learning, fighting, struggling to grow stronger. He had been harsh, even cruel, but he had also given her the strength to survive. Now he was gone, and she alone carried the mantle of the Sith. But the rule of two was not complete with only one. There had to be an apprentice. Someone to carry the knowledge forward, to one day challenge her, just as she had challenged Bane. Zannah understood this well. Without an apprentice, the Sith would wither. With one, they would endure forever. It was not long before she found her candidate. His name was Darth, a man who dabbled in the dark side but had not yet fully embraced it. He was clever, ambitious, and hungry for power, qualities that Zannah recognized immediately. She tested him, pushing him to prove his worth. "Why should I take you as my apprentice?" she asked him, her voice calm but edged like a blade. "Because I have no limits," Seth answered boldly. "The Jedi chain themselves with rules. Others hide from their destiny. But I want strength. I want to learn." Zannah studied him, remembering her own meeting with Bane years ago in the forests of Ruusan. She had been small and frightened, but Bane had seen her potential. Now she stood in his place, weighing the choice before her. At last, she nodded. "Then you will serve as my apprentice. You will learn from me, but know this, one day you must challenge me. If you succeed, the Sith will live on through you. If you fail, you will die." Seth bowed, but Zannah saw the spark in his eyes. Ambition. Desire. Just as it should be. With her apprentice at her side, Zannah began to shape her own rule. Unlike Bane, who relied heavily on brute force, she relied on cunning, patience, and deception. She was a master of Sith sorcery, and she wove her knowledge carefully, never revealing too much at once. She understood that the Sith must remain hidden in the shadows, building their strength quietly until the time came to strike. She studied the mistakes of her master. Bane had believed in creating armies, in raising the Sith to march openly against the Jedi. But that had brought only destruction and defeat. Zannah chose a different path. "We will be unseen," she told Seth. "The Jedi will believe the Sith destroyed. And while they grow complacent, we will grow strong." In the years that followed, Zannah became a shadow in the galaxy. Few knew her name, but her influence spread quietly. She gathered secrets, ancient Sith knowledge that had been forgotten. She taught Seth what she chose to teach him, always keeping her apprentice hungry for more, always careful not to give him the tools to overthrow her too soon. At times, Seth's impatience tested her. "When will I be ready to surpass you?" he demanded once, his tone sharp. Zannah's eyes glowed with cold fire. "When you can take the power from me. Until then, you are the apprentice. Do not forget your place." And though he burned with frustration, Seth bowed his head, for he knew she was stronger, for now. In quiet moments, Zannah thought of Bane. She remembered his great strength, his unshakable will, and the way he had shaped her. But she also remembered his mistakes, his arrogance, and his belief that only brute force could rule the galaxy. She would not repeat those errors. She was not Darth Bane. She was Darth Zannah. And she would make the Sith endure. For the galaxy believed the Sith were gone. The Jedi thought the darkness had been extinguished. But hidden in the shadows, Darth Zannah carried the flame forward. The rule of two continued, stronger than ever. The chain of Sith had not been broken, it had only just begun. Darth Zannah had claimed her place as the Dark Lord of the Sith, and with her apprentice, Darth, she carried the rule of two into a new age. But unlike her master before her, Zannah did not seek battles that would draw attention. She knew the Jedi believed the Sith destroyed, and she wanted it to stay that way. Hidden in the shadows, she built her power quietly, patiently, with the mind of a spider weaving a web. "Patience is the key to victory," she told Seth. "The Jedi look for grand wars and open enemies. They will never suspect what they cannot see." Seth listened, but he often grew restless. He liked action, treasures, and adventures. He wanted to take risks. More than once, he broke Zannah's orders, running off to chase his own schemes. Though he was clever, Zannah could see the flaw in him. He lacked the discipline to truly embrace the Sith path. Still, she kept him close. An imperfect apprentice was better than none at all. And as long as he hungered for her knowledge, he served his purpose. Zannah herself grew wiser with every year. She explored forgotten ruins, studying ancient Sith magic that even Bane had not mastered. Her gift for sorcery grew sharper, allowing her to twist minds and bend wills with terrifying ease. Whole groups of enemies would fall before her illusions, convinced they were trapped in nightmares too real to ignore. She also became skilled in another kind of weapon, patience. Zannah knew when to strike and when to remain hidden. When enemies came too close, she did not fight openly but instead guided events from the shadows, turning allies against one another until they destroyed themselves. Why waste a blade, she would say, when the mind is sharper? This way, she and her apprentice moved through the galaxy, never revealing themselves as Sith, never drawing too much attention. To the Jedi, they were invisible. To the galaxy, they were myths. But the rule of two lived on. Still, the life of a Sith master was not simple. The rule of two was both strength and danger, for Zannah knew that one day her apprentice must challenge her. It was the way of the Sith. A master could only rule as long as she remained stronger than her apprentice. And Set, though flawed, still carried ambition in his heart. Once, during a heated moment, he dared to question her strength. "You think I will serve you forever?" "One day, Zannah, I will take your place." Her response was calm, almost cold. "If that day comes, you will have earned it. But until then, remember this, you are alive only because I allow it. Do not mistake patience for weakness." Set said nothing more, but Zannah saw the hunger in his eyes. It was the hunger she had once felt toward Darth Bane. The rule of two was a chain, unbroken, each link replacing the last. One day, she knew, Set or another apprentice would challenge her, and she would have to prove her strength again. But she was ready. Zannah's legacy was not just about survival, it was about shaping the Sith into something the Jedi could never destroy. No longer would the Sith rise in great armies, only to be struck down. Instead, they would wait, hidden, until the galaxy forgot they even existed. And when the time was right, the Sith would strike from the shadows, and the Jedi would fall. For now, though, Zannah ruled in secret, her sorcery unmatched, her cunning unmatched, her patience endless. To the galaxy, she was invisible. To the Jedi, she was a ghost. But in truth, she was the keeper of a fire that would one day burn brighter than ever. The Sith were not gone. They were waiting. And Darth Zannah, once a frightened little girl named Rain, now stood as their guardian and guide, ensuring that the rule of two endured. Darth Zannah's life had begun as a frightened child called Rain, lost on the battlefield of Ruusan. But now, many years later, she was no longer that girl. She was the Dark Lord of the Sith, keeper of the rule of two, and the guardian of a legacy that would shape the galaxy for generations. She had learned patience, and patience had become her greatest weapon. The Jedi believed they had won. They thought the Sith destroyed, wiped away by their wars. But Zannah knew the truth. The Sith were not gone, they were only hidden, growing stronger in silence. She kept her apprentice, Set Hearth, close for a time, teaching him what she wished him to know, holding back the secrets that would give him too much power too soon. Yet she also saw his weakness, his greed, his restlessness, his hunger for treasures rather than destiny. He was not the perfect heir to the Sith, but he served his role. For a master must always have an apprentice, someone who will one day try to take their place. That was the way of the Sith. The rule of two was not just a rule, it was a chain. Each link forged in battle, each master replaced by a stronger apprentice. Zannah had taken her master's place by defeating Darth Bane. One day, her apprentice, or another after him, would rise to challenge her. And if they won, the Sith would live on through them. If they failed, she would remain. Zannah accepted this truth without fear. It was not weakness. It was survival. It was destiny. And so her story did not end with a final victory or a final fall. It continued, stretching far beyond her lifetime. She became part of the unbroken chain of Sith Lords that carried the rule of two forward. From her, the Sith line would continue, passing from master to apprentice, from apprentice to master, until, many generations later, it would reach Darth Sidious and his apprentice Darth Vader. It was Zannah's patience and cunning that allowed the Sith to survive the ages. She did not seek glory in the moment. She planted seeds for the future. The galaxy forgot her name, but her influence endured in every shadow where the Sith hid, in every whisper of the dark side that grew stronger, waiting for the day to strike. Her life was a story of choice. A little girl named Rain could have been lost forever in the chaos of war. But she chose to follow the path of strength. She chose to embrace her power. She chose to become Darth Zannah. And though her story faded into legend, her legacy remained. For the Sith never die. They endure, passing their fire from one to the next, like a torch in the darkness. Darth Zannah was one link in that endless chain, a chain that would one day change the galaxy forever. And so the story of Rain, the girl from Ruusan, closes not with an ending, but with a beginning. Darth Zannah was one of the most important Sith in history, even though many in the galaxy never knew her name. She began life as a little girl named Rain, living peacefully on the planet Somavrit. But her family was caught up in the terrible war between the Jedi and the Sith, a war that eventually led them to the planet Ruusan. There, Rain's life changed forever. When the Battle of Ruusan destroyed much of the world, Rain became separated from her family. She was lost, frightened, and surrounded by the horrors of war. But it was during this time that she discovered something incredible. She was sensitive to the Force. This power allowed her to move objects, protect herself, and even lash out when she was scared. She didn't understand it yet, but her abilities made her different, and very valuable to anyone who could train her. It was on Ruusan that she met Darth Bane, one of the last surviving Sith Lords. Bane had decided to change the Sith forever. Instead of many Sith fighting and betraying one another, he created the rule of two. There could only ever be two Sith at a time, a master and an apprentice. The master would hold the power, and the apprentice would learn until the time came to challenge the master. Bane saw great potential in Rain and gave her a new name, Zannah. From then on, she was his apprentice. Zannah's training under Bane was long and harsh. She learned how to wield a lightsaber, how to channel her emotions into strength, and most importantly, how to use Sith sorcery. Unlike Bane, whose power came from raw strength and endurance, Zannah was clever, subtle, and gifted in manipulating the minds of others. She became skilled at creating illusions so real that enemies would believe monsters surrounded them, or that the ground beneath their feet was crumbling. She could twist thoughts, frighten foes, and even attack their very sanity. This made her one of the most dangerous Sith ever, because she didn't need brute force to win. Her mind was her sharpest weapon. Over time, Zannah proved herself again and again. She fought Jedi Knights and defeated them using her illusions and sorcery. She faced mercenaries, beasts, and dangerous missions that tested her patience and cunning. She understood that the dark side was not only about strength but also about control and cleverness. She studied ancient Sith texts and secrets, learning knowledge even Bane did not fully master. Eventually, the time came when Zannah had to face her master. According to the rule of two, she could not remain an apprentice forever. If she was truly worthy, she had to challenge Bane and take his place. Their battle was fierce and legendary. Bane's strikes were like thunder, powerful and overwhelming, but Zannah used her illusions and sorcery to weaken him. She unleashed spells that attacked his very mind, showing him nightmares and visions that broke his focus. In the end, she defeated Darth Bane and became the new Dark Lord of the Sith. As master, Zannah did not repeat Bane's mistakes. She understood that the Sith could not survive by fighting openly against the Jedi. Instead, she kept the Sith hidden, working in shadows and secrets. She knew the Jedi believed the Sith were destroyed, and she wanted them to keep believing that. While they grew comfortable and overconfident, she and her apprentice would prepare for the future. Zannah chose a man named Set Harth as her apprentice. Set was ambitious and clever, but also greedy and reckless. He loved treasures and adventures, and he did not always follow Zannah's teachings with discipline. Still, she taught him what she needed to, keeping back the most dangerous secrets until the time came for him to challenge her. She knew that one day he, or another apprentice, would try to overthrow her, just as she had done with Bane. That was the way of the Sith. Zannah's greatest legacy was not a single battle or a single victory, but survival. She ensured that the rule of two continued. From her, the line of Sith passed down, generation after generation, through many apprentices and masters, until eventually it reached Darth Sidious, also known as Emperor Palpatine, and his apprentice Darth Vader. Without Zannah, the Sith might have vanished forever after Ruusan. Instead, they lived on, waiting in the shadows for their chance to strike. Though many in the galaxy never knew her name, Darth Zannah was one of the most important figures in Sith history. She was proof that strength could come not only from the blade or from physical power, but also from patience, intelligence, and cunning. She had begun life as Rain, a scared little girl lost in a war. But she became Darth Zannah, Dark Lord of the Sith, and carried the fire of the dark side into the future. Darth Zannah was very different from many other Sith. Most Sith were known for their strength, their lightning-fast attacks, or their ability to crush enemies with raw power. Zannah was not weak, but her greatest gifts came from her mind. She was clever, patient, and skilled in using the dark side in ways most others could not. From the very beginning of her training with Darth Bane, Zannah showed a talent for Sith sorcery. Sorcery was a dangerous and rare branch of the dark side, filled with ancient spells and knowledge that even many Sith could not master. While Bane's strength came from his muscles and his endurance, Zannah's power came from her ability to attack the mind. Her most famous ability was her illusions. She could use the Force to create visions so real that her enemies believed they were truly happening. A warrior might suddenly see the ground crumbling beneath his feet, or monstrous creatures lunging at him, their teeth sharp and dripping. Some would even feel pain from wounds that weren't real, simply because their minds believed it. The illusions were so powerful that Jedi Knights, trained to resist the dark side, could still be fooled. Zannah's illusions gave her an enormous advantage in battle. She did not need to meet her enemies blow for blow. Instead, she would let their own fears and confusion defeat them. While they swung wildly at phantoms or stumbled in terror, she could strike swiftly and cleanly. But Zannah's sorcery went beyond simple illusions. She could also unleash dark tendrils of energy that attacked the very thoughts and sanity of her opponents. These spells were so strong that even Darth Bane himself struggled against them when they fought. She could twist the minds of her enemies until they were screaming, unable to tell what was real and what was false. This made her one of the most dangerous Sith in history, because she didn't just fight the body, she fought the mind. That did not mean she was helpless with a lightsaber. Zannah was trained in the art of combat by Bane himself, and she became skilled in using a double-bladed lightsaber, a weapon with a glowing blade on each end. Her style of fighting was called Sorisu, a defensive form of lightsaber combat. Instead of attacking directly, she used tight movements, circles, and quick defenses to protect herself until her opponent made a mistake. This fit her personality well, calm, patient, and clever. She could outlast stronger foes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Zannah was also highly intelligent. She was not reckless or impatient, like her apprentice Darth. Instead, she thought carefully before acting. She understood that survival was just as important as victory. Unlike Bane, who dreamed of raising great armies and defeating the Jedi in open war, Zannah believed the Sith should remain hidden, striking only when the time was right. She was willing to wait years, even decades, to ensure that the Sith legacy survived. This patience made her different from many other Sith lords. While others let their anger control them, Zannah used hers carefully, like a tool. She did not rush into battles she could not win. She did not waste her strength on pointless fights. Everything she did served a larger plan, keeping the Sith alive, so that one day they could rise again. Her greatest test came in her final battle with Darth Bane. His strength and ferocity were unmatched, but Zannah's sorcery allowed her to overwhelm him. She filled his mind with unbearable visions, twisting his thoughts until even the great Bane faltered. It was through her mastery of sorcery, not brute strength, that she defeated him and claimed the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. In this way, Zannah proved something important. Being a Sith was not only about raw power. It was about cunning, patience, and using the dark side in whatever way gave you the advantage. She showed that strength of mind could be just as deadly as strength of body. Even after she became the master, Zannah continued to perfect her abilities. She studied ancient texts, learning more about Sith sorcery than almost anyone in history. She passed on what she chose to her apprentice, ensuring the knowledge would survive, but always holding back enough to keep her position secure. For that was the way of the rule of two, master and apprentice, each waiting for the moment when the chain would continue. Darth Zannah's powers were feared by those who faced her, but they were also admired by those who studied the Sith. She was living proof that the dark side could take many forms, not just strength and fury, but also patience, subtlety, and intelligence. Her legacy was not just that she survived. It was that she showed how a Sith could win with the mind as much as with the blade. She was a shadow in the galaxy, quiet but deadly, and through her, the rule of two endured. Darth Zannah was very different from many other Sith. Most Sith were known for their strength, their lightning-fast attacks, or their ability to crush enemies with raw power. Zannah was not weak, but her greatest gifts came from her mind. She was clever, patient, and skilled in using the dark side in ways most others could not. From the very beginning of her training with Darth Bane, Zannah showed a talent for Sith sorcery. Sorcery was a dangerous and rare branch of the dark side, filled with ancient spells and knowledge that even many Sith could not master. While Bane's strength came from his muscles and his endurance, Zannah's power came from her ability to attack the mind. Her most famous ability was her illusions. She could use the Force to create visions so real that her enemies believed they were truly happening. A warrior might suddenly see the ground crumbling beneath his feet, or monstrous creatures lunging at him, their teeth sharp and dripping. Some would even feel pain from wounds that weren't real, simply because their minds believed it. The illusions were so powerful that Jedi Knights, trained to resist the dark side, could still be fooled. Zannah's illusions gave her an enormous advantage in battle. She did not need to meet her enemies blow for blow. Instead, she would let their own fears and confusion defeat them. While they swung wildly at phantoms or stumbled in terror, she could strike swiftly and cleanly. But Zannah's sorcery went beyond simple illusions. She could also unleash dark tendrils of energy that attacked the very thoughts and sanity of her opponents. These spells were so strong that even Darth Bane himself struggled against them when they fought. She could twist the minds of her enemies until they were screaming, unable to tell what was real and what was false. This made her one of the most dangerous Sith in history, because she didn't just fight the body, she fought the mind. That did not mean she was helpless with a lightsaber. Zannah was trained in the art of combat by Bane himself, and she became skilled in using a double-bladed lightsaber, a weapon with a glowing blade on each end. Her style of fighting was called Sorisu, a defensive form of lightsaber combat. Instead of attacking directly, she used tight movements, circles, and quick defenses to protect herself until her opponent made a mistake. This fit her personality well: calm, patient, and clever. She could outlast stronger foes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Zannah was also highly intelligent. She was not reckless or impatient, like her apprentice Darth. Instead, she thought carefully before acting. She understood that survival was just as important as victory. Unlike Bane, who dreamed of raising great armies and defeating the Jedi in open war, Zannah believed the Sith should remain hidden, striking only when the time was right. She was willing to wait years, even decades, to ensure that the Sith legacy survived. This patience made her different from many other Sith lords. While others let their anger control them, Zannah used hers carefully, like a tool. She did not rush into battles she could not win. She did not waste her strength on pointless fights. Everything she did served a larger plan, keeping the Sith alive, so that one day they could rise again. Her greatest test came in her final battle with Darth Bane. His strength and ferocity were unmatched, but Zannah's sorcery allowed her to overwhelm him. She filled his mind with unbearable visions, twisting his thoughts until even the great Bane faltered. It was through her mastery of sorcery, not brute strength, that she defeated him and claimed the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. In this way, Zannah proved something important: being a Sith was not only about raw power. It was about cunning, patience, and using the dark side in whatever way gave you the advantage. She showed that strength of mind could be just as deadly as strength of body. Even after she became the master, Zannah continued to perfect her abilities. She studied ancient texts, learning more about Sith sorcery than almost anyone in history. She passed on what she chose to her apprentice, ensuring the knowledge would survive, but always holding back enough to keep her position secure. For that was the way of the rule of two, master and apprentice, each waiting for the moment when the chain would continue. Darth Zannah's powers were feared by those who faced her, but they were also admired by those who studied the Sith. She was living proof that the dark side could take many forms, not just strength and fury, but also patience, subtlety, and intelligence. Her legacy was not just that she survived. It was that she showed how a Sith could win with the mind as much as with the blade. She was a shadow in the galaxy, quiet but deadly, and through her, the rule of two endured. Darth Zannah's life could never be told without also telling the story of Darth Bane. The two were tied together from the very beginning. Bane was her master, her teacher, and the one who gave her the name Zannah. But their relationship was never simple. It was built on power, fear, and destiny, because in the rule of two, there could only be one master and one apprentice, and one day, the apprentice must replace the master. When Zannah was just a girl, she met Bane on the battlefield of Ruusan. At first, she was afraid of him. He was enormous, strong, and full of a power she could barely understand. But Bane saw something in her that others would have overlooked. He saw her potential with the Force, her sharp mind, and her hidden strength. He took her under his wing, not out of kindness, but because he needed an apprentice to continue his rule of two. At the start of her training, Zannah admired Bane's power. He seemed unstoppable, like a living storm. He taught her the ways of the Sith, to draw strength from anger, to let pain fuel determination, and to never hesitate when power was within reach. But as time passed, Zannah began to see his flaws. Bane was strong, yes, but he was also reckless in his dreams. He wanted the Sith to rise again in open war, to crush the Jedi and rule the galaxy with armies and might. Zannah understood that this was foolish. The Sith had already destroyed themselves once through fighting and betrayal. To try again so soon would only bring disaster. Where Bane was bold and fierce, Zannah was patient and cautious. She believed survival mattered more than glory. This difference shaped their entire relationship. Bane pushed her to grow stronger, to master the dark side, and to prepare for the day she might challenge him. Zannah, meanwhile, learned everything she could, but always with her own ideas about the Sith's future. She respected Bane, but she also questioned him. She studied ancient Sith knowledge in secret, focusing on sorcery and illusions, skills Bane never mastered fully. She was preparing not just to replace him, but to change the Sith into something smarter, something hidden, something that could last. Their relationship grew strained as the years went by. Bane sometimes doubted whether Zannah was truly strong enough to take his place. He even considered finding a new apprentice, someone who would be more like him. This distrust only deepened the gap between them. Zannah, however, never let her emotions cloud her judgment. She knew the rule of two was bigger than either of them. One day, she would have to face him, whether he trusted her or not. When that day finally came, their differences became clear. Their battle was not just a fight between master and apprentice. It was a battle between two visions of what the Sith should be. Bane fought with raw power, smashing through walls and striking with the strength of a hammer. Zannah fought with her mind, using illusions and sorcery to twist his thoughts and break his focus. In the end, her way proved stronger. She defeated Bane, not by overpowering him physically, but by showing that cunning and patience could defeat even the greatest strength. By killing her master, Zannah proved herself worthy of being the Dark Lord of the Sith. But in truth, the fight was not just about proving who was stronger. It was about deciding the future of the Sith. Bane's dream of armies and war died with him. Zannah's vision of secrecy, patience, and survival lived on. Still, Zannah never forgot what Bane had taught her. Even though she had surpassed him, she carried his lessons with her. He had shown her how to harness the dark side, how to never fear pain, and how to always prepare for betrayal. In her own way, she honored him by continuing the rule of two. Yet she also made it her own, shaping it into something far more lasting than Bane had ever imagined. Their relationship was one of respect, tension, and inevitability. Bane gave Zannah the tools to rise, and Zannah used those tools to surpass him. They were master and apprentice, but also rivals waiting for the day when only one could remain. In the end, their story was the perfect example of the rule of two. The master held the power, the apprentice gained strength, and eventually the apprentice replaced the master. Bane's role was to create the rule. Zannah's role was to perfect it. Together, they ensured the survival of the Sith, not through armies or open battles, but through patience, cunning, and the endless chain of master and apprentice. Without Bane, Zannah would never have become the Sith she was. Without Zannah, Bane's rule of two might have failed. Their destinies were bound together, two halves of a story that shaped the galaxy in secret for generations to come. Darth Zannah may not be as famous as Darth Vader or Emperor Palpatine, but in truth, she is one of the most important Sith who ever lived. Without her, the Sith might have vanished from history after the Battle of Ruusan. Instead, because of Zannah's choices, the Sith survived in secret for 1,000 years, long enough to finally defeat the Jedi and take over the galaxy. To understand Zannah's place in history, we must look back to the time before her. For many centuries, the Sith had been strong in numbers. They had armies, fleets, and great battles against the Jedi. But their strength was also their weakness. The Sith were greedy and jealous of one another. They betrayed each other, fought among themselves, and tore their order apart. That is why Darth Bane created the rule of two, one master, one apprentice. The master held the power, and the apprentice learned until the day they could challenge their master. This way, the Sith would grow stronger over generations, without destroying themselves through endless wars. But even Bane, with all his power, dreamed of one day raising new armies and fighting the Jedi openly again. If he had lived and tried this, the Sith might have been destroyed once more. It was Zannah who made sure that didn't happen. When she defeated Bane and became Dark Lord of the Sith, she chose a different path. She believed the Sith should stay hidden, working in the shadows where the Jedi would not see them coming. This was Zannah's great contribution to Sith history, patience. She understood that the Jedi were too strong to defeat in open war. But if the Sith remained secret, striking from the shadows, they could slowly weaken the Jedi and prepare for a future victory. This meant that instead of ruling with armies, the Sith would rule through cunning, secrecy, and carefully chosen apprentices. Zannah herself chose Siddharth as her apprentice, though he was not a perfect student. Still, through him and others who came after, the line of Sith continued, master to apprentice, for centuries. Each new Sith built on the knowledge of the one before them. Each one grew stronger, wiser, and more dangerous. This long chain of masters and apprentices eventually led to Darth Plagueis, and then to his apprentice, Darth Sidious. Darth Sidious, better known as Emperor Palpatine, was the Sith who finally accomplished what Zannah had made possible. By hiding in plain sight, pretending to be a simple politician, he fooled the Jedi for years. While the Jedi grew comfortable, believing the Sith were long gone, Sidious prepared his grand plan. He used the shadows just as Zannah had taught long ago, waiting for the perfect time to strike. When the Clone Wars began, Sidious was ready. He controlled both sides of the conflict, turning the Republic into an empire under his rule. He wiped out the Jedi with Order 66 and claimed the galaxy for the Sith. None of this would have been possible without the survival of the Sith line that began with Bane and Zannah. Think of it this way, Darth Bane planted the seed by creating the rule of two. But Zannah was the one who protected that seed, watering it and hiding it until it grew into something far greater. She ensured the Sith survived quietly, generation after generation, until the day came when they could finally rise. This makes Zannah one of the most important Sith in history. She was not the loudest, not the strongest in brute force, and not the one who ruled the galaxy openly. But she was the protector of the Sith legacy. She was the reason the Sith endured when they should have been forgotten. The Jedi never knew how close their enemies were. They believed that after Ruusan, the Sith were destroyed forever. For centuries, they were blind to the truth. And that blindness was exactly what Zannah wanted. Her patience and secrecy gave the Sith the time they needed to grow stronger, to study, to plan, and to wait for the right moment. In the end, when Emperor Palpatine stood at the head of the Galactic Empire and Darth Vader struck fear into the galaxy, they were standing on a foundation built by Zannah. Every shadowy whisper, every careful plan, every lesson passed down through the rule of two carried a piece of her. So, while the galaxy remembers names like Sidious and Vader, the truth is that none of them would have existed without Darth Zannah. She was the bridge between the old, broken Sith and the new, patient Sith who would one day conquer the galaxy. Her place in history is clear. Darth Bane created the rule of two, but Darth Zannah perfected it. And through her perfection, the Sith survived long enough to finally win. Darth Zannah's story began far away from the great cities and shining worlds of the galaxy. She was born as a simple girl named Rain on the planet Somavrid. Nobody would have guessed that this small child would one day become one of the most powerful Sith in history. Her life changed forever during the great battles between the Jedi and the Sith on the planet Ruusan. Rain was just a child caught in the chaos of war. She was lost, frightened, and thought she would die like so many others. But then something inside her awakened, the Force. When she touched the dark side for the first time, it came out in a burst of power, deadly and wild. That was when Darth Bane, the last surviving Sith Lord of that time, found her. Bane saw more than a scared child. He saw potential. He saw an apprentice. Bane took Rain under his wing and gave her a new name, Zannah. From that moment, she was no longer a helpless child. She was the apprentice to the Dark Lord of the Sith. Bane taught her the ways of the dark side, the anger, the strength, and the endless hunger for power. But Zannah was different from her master. Where Bane was a hammer, smashing everything in his path, Zannah was a whisper, careful and cunning. She did not rush into battles. She waited. She thought. She planned. As she grew older, Zannah discovered her true gift, Sith sorcery. She could twist the minds of her enemies, filling their heads with terrifying visions and illusions. A soldier might see monsters that weren't real. A Jedi might feel his skin burning even though no fire touched him. Her illusions were so strong that even Darth Bane himself could barely resist them. This made her incredibly dangerous, for she did not need to be stronger or faster than her enemies, she only needed to outthink them. Zannah also mastered the double-bladed lightsaber. She fought with a defensive style called Sorisu, which allowed her to survive against stronger foes until they made mistakes. Combined with her sorcery, this made her nearly unbeatable. But the rule of two meant that her relationship with Bane was never just teacher and student. It was also a promise. One day, she would have to rise against him. The master holds the power, the apprentice gains strength, and when the time is right, the apprentice must kill the master and take their place. For years, this moment hung in the air between them. Bane sometimes doubted Zannah's will. Zannah, in turn, quietly prepared, studying secrets that even he did not know. At last, the day came. Zannah faced her master in a final duel. It was not just a battle of blades, but of wills. Bane struck with fury and strength, but Zannah filled his mind with her sorcery. She showed him horrors that broke even his iron control. In the end, Zannah defeated Darth Bane and claimed her destiny. She became the Dark Lord of the Sith. Her victory was more than just personal. It was the moment when the Sith changed forever. Bane had dreamed of raising armies to fight the Jedi again, but Zannah knew better. She understood that the Jedi could not be beaten in open battle. Instead, she chose patience. She kept the Sith hidden, working in shadows, passing the dark side down from master to apprentice in secret. Zannah's decision shaped the future of the galaxy. Through her, the Sith survived when they might have been wiped out forever. One apprentice after another, the line continued, growing stronger with each generation. Centuries later, this chain led to Darth Plagueis, and then to Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine, who finally destroyed the Jedi and built the Galactic Empire. In this way, Zannah was the silent guardian of the Sith legacy. She was not as famous as the Sith who came after her, but without her patience, her cunning, and her vision, there would have been no Sidious, no Vader, no Empire. She kept the flame alive when it could have gone out. Zannah's life teaches us that strength comes in many forms. Bane's strength was raw power, but Zannah's was cleverness, patience, and mastery of the mind. She proved that the Sith could survive not just by force, but by outsmarting their enemies. She showed that the shadows could be even more powerful than the light. From the frightened little girl named Rain to the patient and cunning Darth Zannah, her journey was one of survival, strength, and destiny. She may have walked quietly compared to others, but her footsteps shaped the galaxy for centuries. Through her, the Sith endured. Through her, the galaxy would never be the same. Darth Zannah was not the kind of Sith who charged into battle swinging wildly. She was a thinker, a planner, and a fighter who used her mind as much as her blade. To understand her fully, we must look at the tools she used, the way she fought, and the powers that made her so dangerous. The first thing to know is her lightsaber. Unlike many Jedi and Sith who carried one simple blade, Zannah carried a double-bladed lightsaber. Imagine two red blades extending from each end of a long handle, spinning and flashing like fire. It was a weapon that required great skill, because it was just as dangerous to the user as to the enemy. But Zannah trained carefully until she mastered it. She used her double-bladed lightsaber in a fighting style called Sorisu, also known as the form of the Guardian. This style focused on defense. Instead of attacking head-on, Zannah would block, dodge, and deflect, waiting for her opponent to make mistakes. Her blade spun like a shield, protecting her from strikes while she calmly studied her enemy. This made her fights last longer, but that was exactly what she wanted. The longer the battle, the more time she had to use her real weapon, her mind. Because Zannah's greatest strength was not her lightsaber, but her mastery of Sith sorcery. Sorcery was the art of using the dark side to attack the mind instead of the body. While others hurled lightning or crushed enemies with the Force, Zannah filled their heads with terrifying visions. She could make people see things that weren't real. A warrior might look down and think his skin was crawling with insects. A Jedi might hear voices whispering in his ear or see his own friends turn into monsters. These illusions were so powerful that the victim often believed them completely, even if they weren't real. Some were driven mad, others were frozen in fear, and some even harmed themselves trying to fight off things that only existed in their minds. Even her master, Darth Bane, feared her sorcery. He was one of the strongest Sith who ever lived, yet when Zannah used her illusions on him, he struggled to resist. That was how powerful she was. Her sorcery was not about brute strength, it was about breaking the mind, twisting fear, and using her opponent's imagination against them. Alongside her sorcery, Zannah was skilled in the regular powers of the dark side. She could use the Force to move objects, leap great distances, and sense danger before it happened. But she always preferred patience over flashiness. Instead of overwhelming enemies with lightning like some Sith, she quietly watched, shielded herself, and waited for the moment to strike where they were weakest. Her entire way of fighting reflected her personality. Zannah was calm, patient, and cunning. She didn't rush. She didn't roar with anger like many Sith. She understood that anger could be fuel, but losing control could also be deadly. Her control was her strength. While others exploded with fury, she guided her power like a knife, sharp and precise. This made her different from her master, Darth Bane. Bane was raw power, like a storm tearing apart everything in its path. Zannah was the calm after the storm, the shadow that lingered and struck when no one expected it. Together, they showed two sides of the Sith, brute force and clever patience. One famous example of her style was her final battle with Bane. Bane fought with overwhelming strength, his massive blade hammering against her defenses. But Zannah never panicked. She blocked, twisted, and retreated, letting his rage burn hot. Then she struck back with her sorcery, filling his mind with horrors until even he could not tell what was real. In the end, it was not his body that failed him, but his mind. Zannah had broken him without ever needing to match his strength. That victory showed what made her unique in Sith history. She was not the strongest in the way people usually imagine. She didn't win by lifting heavy objects or throwing bolts of lightning. She won by being patient, clever, and precise. She used her double-bladed lightsaber to defend herself, her sorcery to unbalance her enemies, and her calm mind to outlast anyone who stood against her. This is why Darth Zannah was so dangerous. Anyone can swing a blade. Many can call upon the Force. But very few can use patience, intelligence, and sorcery together as she did. She turned her weaknesses into strengths and proved that the mind can be the sharpest weapon of all. In the long history of the Sith, there were many powerful warriors. But Darth Zannah stood apart because she showed that the shadows of the mind can be even deadlier than the flames of anger. Her weapons were not just her blade and her power, they were her patience, her control, and her unshakable will.